Call to order the October 4th meeting of the Cary Town Council, and I would ask that this time you would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may have noticed there are 6 of us here tonight. Councilmember Robinson has been called out of town on work and has a conflict and will be unable to join us this evening. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda. The Cyber Security Month proclamation will be removed from the agenda and will be on an online safety presentation at our next meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We'll move right into our one and only public hearing. The first public hearing and only public hearing is 3.1 ACT 6 Land Development Ordinance Amendments. Christine Sunday, you got to help me. Sunday will introduce the item. Council will not take action on this rezoning tonight. It will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board, and the item will return to council at a future meeting. Thank you, Ms. Sunday.
All right. Good evening, council. This is the public hearing for the Act 6 Land Development Ordinance Amendments. The Land Development Ordinance is an important tool for carrying out the vision of the Cary Community Plan. It contains many of the development-related regulations that are critical to the implementation of plan initiatives. We bring forward changes to the LDO, as well as changes to related plans, policies, and guidelines as ACT items in reference to the ACT chapter of the Cary Community Plan. Act 6 includes 3 items for public hearing tonight. The first item updates the existing transit facilities requirements to provide clearer, more consistent guidelines to meet current transit needs. The other 2 are minor technical amendments and include item B, which is needed for consistency with state legislation, and item C provides for telecommunication towers that are needed on a temporary basis. In 2016, Wake County voters approved the half-cent sales tax to fund public transportation investments in the county. As part of this investment, Go Cary is embarking on its largest expansion of service since its inception in 2001, with new and expanded transit service as identified in the Cary Community Plan, Wake County Transit Plan, and Western Wake Comprehensive Operations Analysis. To make these plans a reality for Cary citizens, we must progress the vision contained in these plans to law in the LDO. Item A updates the existing transit facilities requirements to optimize Cary's investment in public transportation. Bus stops with appropriate infrastructure and amenities encourage transit usage by providing safe and comfortable places for pedestrians to wait for transit away from grass, mud, and traffic. They are also accessible for persons with disabilities, which meets federal law. It is important that as our community continues to grow, develop, and redevelop, that transit needs are considered as part of the development plan review process. High-quality bus stops should be constructed and placed into service efficiency as new developments open, and future development should seamlessly integrate transit service into its design when appropriate. There are 3 key changes to the existing ordinance. The first is to apply transit requirements comprehensively. The current ordinance applies only to a narrow list of uses, not addressing many other transit destinations as well as existing service. The proposed amendment will require construction of transit infrastructure, dedication of transit easements, or both, to apply to all development plans, reuse redevelopment plans, or when non-conforming transit facilities are affected along current or planned transit routes. Transit requirements applying to more development will connect more people across Cary. The proposed amendment also establishes a threshold to trigger transit infrastructure improvements related to bus stop spacing to provide clearer expectations when improvements are required. This provides for more certainty and expectations with which the development community has been asking for. Lastly, most of the detailed access and infrastructure specifications and guidelines will be moved out of the LDO to the town's standard specifications and details manual. This results in a cleaner and easier to follow ordinance while providing for more flexibility to adjust to changing needs and practices in the technical aspects of bus stop design. The manual will also be updated in connection with the passage of this LDO amendment to be clearer, meet federal requirements, and to tailor the level of bus stop amenities to existing or projected demand at the stop. Item B amends the definition of subdivision to comply with recent amendments to state law. The legislature created a new category of subdivision that is exempt from town subdivision requirements, such as the dedication of right-of-way, applicable to certain subdivisions of 3 or fewer lots. Item C helps ensure continuity of wireless coverage during maintenance of cell towers and other structures like town water tanks by making it easier for wireless carriers to find sites to locate temporary towers. The temporary towers must be removed once the maintenance of the permanent structure is complete. And so that concludes the staff presentation, and staff is available for questions following the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Sunday. So now's the time for the public hearing for Act 6 Land Development Ordinance Amendments, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comments.
I just have one question. We were talking about the transit facilities, new transit or new bus stops, that they have to comply with the new standards. What about the example in the picture that you showed us for the older ones? What's the plan of bringing those up to standards?
Yeah, so the way that this updated ordinance reads, it also applies to existing transit stops if the stop will be affected with new development or like a redevelopment plan. So basically, if someone were to come in and redevelop a site and affect the stop location, they would have to bring it up to current town specifications.
Well, what about the ones that are already there, that are on already widened roads? Like the ones I think the one you saw or
Right.
used as an example is already on one of those roads.
Right, if it's not included as part of a redevelopment plan, the town currently does have a bus stop inventory and improvement project that we are going to take forth over the next year or two, funded through Wake Transit tax
Great,
funds.
that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, this will go to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review, and once they've reviewed it, they will make a recommendation. It will come back to council probably in a couple of months or so, and the council will make a decision on the amendments at that time. So before we go into a quasi-judicial hearing, we need to reset the table, so we're going to take a 5-minute recess, and we'll try to stick very closely to that 5-minute. We'll reconvene our meeting and start the QJ meeting. We're at our first evidentiary hearing, Twin Lakes Center Development Plans 18 DP 0135 and 19 DP 0037. This case is before us tonight because the applicant has proposed revisions to the prior development plan approved by council. As a reminder to those in attendance, even though we're in the council chambers, an evidentiary hearing is more like a court case, and counsel acts like the judge and can only accept evidence that is competent, material, and substantial. The North Carolina and the United States Constitution give the applicant certain due process rights in an evidentiary hearing that the council must comply with. The Constitution really ties our hands on evidence we can accept, and I apologize in advance for what might seem burdensome or complex. We will consider competent, material, and substantial evidence from anyone who testifies. By law, we can only accept testimony from expert witnesses regarding whether this development will affect property values and whether it will increase traffic resulting from this development, or if it will pose a danger to public safety. Those who are with us this evening intending to testify that are not qualified as experts, we can only accept testimony from you on factual issues that you have observed. Our contractual attorney who's sitting to my left will help determine who's an expert and what evidence can be considered. The hearing procedures detail rules are attached to the printed agenda. All speakers who want to speak during the public hearing must be administered an oath by Mrs. Johnson, who is to my right, and we'll pause at this time to allow those individuals who would like to speak at the public hearing to approach Mrs. Johnson and receive their oaths, and council will refrain from continuing until this has been completed. This should be quick. Your reduction is usually don't get right.
At the end of those, everyone will say, I do concur. I do solemnly affirm that the evidence I give to the Cary Town Council and the case to be heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
At this time, I'll ask council members if they've had any site visits, expertise communications, financial relationships, specialized knowledge, or close relationships to an affected person to disclose. Starting on my left with Mr. Urha.
I have not, Mayor.
Ms. Bush?
I have not.
Mr. France?
Nope.
I haven't either. Mr. Smith?
I haven't.
Mr. George? All right, very good. Based on the disclosures you've heard from council members, at this time, I'd invite any party to the podium, any party to this matter that has an objection to any council member's participation in the hearing. Seeing no one, will continue, and I'll open the quasi-judicial public hearing. Mr. Loveland of our staff will introduce the hearing. Mr. Loveland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. This is a request by Leland Twin Lakes LLC for consideration of a revised development plan. Council reviewed and approved the sketch plan for Twin Lakes Development Center on July 13, 2017. Consequently, town staff reviewed the full development plan and determined that it was consistent with the council-approved sketch plan and therefore approved that document in April of this year. After the approval of that document, the development plan, the applicant came back to the town requesting some changes to the plan. It was determined that those changes were not fully consistent with the adopted plan, hence they needed to come back for approval, and we are here tonight. To remind the audience where this site is located, is south of Airport Boulevard, east of Davis Drive, west of Hatches Pond. We'll review the approved and revised development plans in just a moment. First, this summary table does a good job of highlighting the proposed changes. The square footage for the development plan, revised development plan, is 27,000 square feet less than the approved development plan. The reason for that is because the large retail building has decreased from 130,000 square feet to 103,000 square feet. The number of plazas or community gathering spaces is increasing from 5 to 6. You'll see that in a moment. The approved development plan had 144 structured parking spaces underneath the large retail building. Those have been removed. They are not included in the revised development plan. The number of surface parking spaces for the development remains constant at 778 spaces. So overall, there's been a decrease of 144 spaces. This is the approved site layout. Before I mention the buildings, I will note that there are no changes to any of the proposed vehicular or pedestrian connection points. Those remain the same. All the off-site roadway improvements that were offered by the approved development plan are also still offered by the revised development plan. There are 4 buildings in the approved development plan. You can see there's 2 stormwater ponds. The large retail building on the left-hand side of the slide at 130,000 square feet. The structured lower-level parking was to the northeast side of the building, accessed from an access drive from Chestway Drive. Building A is a multi-tenant building that was approximately 19,000 square feet. Building B in the middle, a retail or office use at 6,000 square feet. And finally, Building C, 3,000 square feet with a drive-through. The buildings and all the site infrastructure associated with that are to the right or to the southeast of Chestway Drive are not proposed for changes with this revised plan. This slide shows the community gathering areas or plaza areas, which are a item that is brought out of some importance in the PDD, are shown in this slide. There are 5 of them offered in the approved development plan. The revised layout, the large difference is the size changing from 130,000 to 103,000 for the large retail building and the removal of the structured parking as we've covered. There's also been some changes to the layout of the site of the surface parking around this large building. Notably, there have been 28 parking spaces removed from the southeast corner of the building. Those have been relocated to the northeast of the building such that they are located in between the building and Chestway Drive. Also, you can see highlighted there has been an access drive to the surface parking lot that has been relocated. That was shifted farther from the intersection of Chestway Drive and Davis Drive at the request of town staff to result in better internal circulation. The applicant still has to demonstrate that this plan meets the findings, the 6 criteria of approval for a site plan, one of which being conformance with the zoning. So I just briefly want to touch on the existing zoning for the site. The property is located in the Twin Lakes Land Development District, PDD. This PDD has 5 mixed-use parcels. This site is located in one of them, MU2. The properties, the mixed-use parcels allow retail, office, and residential developments or allocations. The approved development plan was within the allocations for retail and office. In other words, it was not exceeding what was permitted for this parcel. It proposed no residential dwelling units. The revised plan, as it is smaller, is also meeting these maximums or within the maximums, and again, it proposes no residential land uses. You see the conceptual master land use plan here from the PDD. It was, of course, determined in the process of approving the plan that it was in conformance with this conceptual master plan. That concludes staff's initial presentation, and I'll return once the applicant and public has spoken to present our final observations.
Thank you, Mr. Loveland. At this time, we'll call on the applicant's attorney to present arguments and evidence in support of the application by addressing the applicable approval criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. My name is Jamie Schwadler with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street. I'm here as the attorney on behalf of the applicant. We're happy to be back before you tonight, and I thank Doug for his great summary of the changes that we're bringing before you tonight to this approved development plan. I think you did a great job in summarizing some of those high-level changes, and we'll go through the testimony tonight and hear from the witnesses about why those changes are necessary and what some of those entail. And with all plans and with all amendments, there's going to be somewhat of a trade-off in terms of things that change and things we're able to recapture and make better in terms of this site plan. So let me get first to why this change is necessary. As the council is probably aware at this point, the main grocery store that's changing is subject to a lease of our anchor tenant. And since this sketch plan was approved by council in 2016, the market has changed quite a bit. The way people use grocery and interact with the space has changed quite a bit. And that initial plan was submitted based on the time when Wegmans was just coming into North Carolina and was using a prototype from 2016. There's been significant changes that this town has seen since 2016 in terms of the way that people interact with grocery and the way that grocery space is used, including the shuttering of the Kroger in town, several other grocery stores that have left Cary, and then, of course, the advent of delivery groceries to your door. And all of these change the way people have needed the space to operate, and so this change really allows our main tenant to be more efficient in that space, to make Cary a hub for their offices, and still provide the same parking and convenience and customer service related activities that made this site successful when it was initially approved in 2017. That modification summary had included from Doug the smaller footprint for the grocery. We're going from 130,000 square feet down to 103, and the removal of the underground parking. But we were also able to increase the green spaces, and we'll go through those in some detail and show you how that's changed on the plan. It also resulted in some other high-level benefits, including expanding an existing outdoor plaza outside of the Market Cafe, adding a brand-new plaza that is proximate to the new Greenway connection so that people have a place to gather as they come off the Greenway, transition to going to get their groceries, a reduction in some of the surface parking that you'd be able to see from Davis Drive, and a better overall traffic circulation and design. And so with that, I'd like to call my first witness, Mr. Steve Leedy.
Good evening, council members. My name is Steve Leedy, and I'm a project manager with Wegmans Food Markets, 100 Wegmans Market Street, Rochester, New York. And we are the anchor tenant in the main retail building. I think it was A on your drawing. Twin Lakes Center is a Class A project thanks to a successful collaboration between the Town of Cary planning staff, the project developer Leyland, and Wegmans Food Markets. It is something we are very excited to be a part of. When this sketch plan was conceived in 2016, the plan used a prototypical building footprint and parking. Since then, there have been many changes in the retail environment, including the way that we do business. We are seeing changes in the way people grocery shop. Customers buy online for home delivery. They order online for in-store pickup or curbside pickup. Large companies are acquiring competition. New competitors are entering the market. Some of this has caused other competition to slow or cancel expansions. To remain competitive in the market and keep this project on track, we are asking to decrease the overall square footage to 103,000 square feet and eliminate the underground parking. We have been able to create efficiencies inside of the building. Better inventory control in the back of house, new prep kitchen and prepared food layouts, new programs that fit the way customers shop, and much more have allowed us to do more with less. We have been able to incorporate these changes into the plans and make the project even better. The surface parking is configured to maintain convenient parking at an ideal parking ratio. We are able to add 1,500 additional square feet to the back of the reconfigured grocery area to build a district office, which will serve as a store operations hub for our North Carolina stores throughout the Triangle area. We have increased the outdoor seating and amenity area near the Market Cafe, along with other site changes that will be detailed. We are committed to building at Twin Lakes Center and in the town of Cary. Wegmans has been rated as the #1 grocery store in America, something we're very proud of. Wegmans will be a great neighbor, and we will bring 400 to 500 new jobs to the area. We will partner and donate to the local food bank, school district, and United Way. We only open 3 stores a year. It is challenging and competitive to get a store slotted in our schedule. There is a slot to begin this store next year and have it open in 2020. And I look forward to your support on this relatively small site plan revision so that we can make that happen. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, I'd like to call our next witness, Mr. Bill Dirks.
Good evening. I'm Bill Dirks with the John McAdams Company. I've been practicing civil engineering, been a licensed civil engineer in North Carolina since 1996, and have done majority of my work all around the Triangle area. I'm just going to walk quickly through the changes that are on this plan. Can I point this? There we go. So we walk around this plan. The building you can see is significantly smaller, the 27,000 square feet, and what that has allowed us to do is to create, by this jog in the parking in the building getting smaller, an actually larger cafe outdoor seating area at that end of the building. And I have a detailed plan that will show that to you later. The bump out on the back where the offices, regional offices will be, has actually allowed a better screening of the loading dock in the back. We also took advantage of this time of increasing the plantings along Chessway and the stormwater pond to provide better screening of the loading dock. With the shorter building, we were able to move some parking along this side, which is more convenient to the store itself, and we were able to remove that from this inside the curve of Chessway Drive. So the Greenway Trail connection that comes up along the stormwater pond will go across the street. There's a little seating area there, and then it's connected by sidewalks that you can get into the grocery store or onto the main street with the retail shops. We also revised some of the plantings along the parking area here because of concerns of the neighbors of street lights from the parking lot. So instead of the required single row of bushes along there, we've actually doubled it up and are planting them larger than required, so we'll provide the screening from the outset of the project. And lastly, Doug mentioned that the entry drive off from Tressway has been moved further away from Davis Drive. It was originally at this second drive aisle. And with this change, we were able to actually lower the building. The building is 2 feet lower, so it will be not quite as tall from Davis Drive. It will be a little shorter and not over the top of Chessway on this end. And that, since that's 2 feet lower, moving the entrance down on the road, we were able to also get a better separation from the intersection of Davis Drive. And this next slide is just a comparison, kind of a bird's eye view of both plans. You can see to a large degree they're not, from a bird's eye view, not significantly different. The impervious area on the site has been reduced with a smaller building and more green space. And as I said, the building itself is 2 feet lower, so it's relative to the surrounding streets and the neighbors, it's a little bit smaller view. This is the plaza on the Market Cafe end of the Wegmans. So the view on the top was what was approved in the sketch plan, and it was identical in the development plan approval. And since the building got smaller, we were able to swing the parking lot out further. So actually this seating area right here is equivalent to this entire hatched area before, which at that time included, sidewalks along the parking area. So the seating area has increased quite a bit in this plan. This is the amenity that was added. And again, this is stormwater pond with the greenway connection that comes up over the top, and you come across with a hardscape area and some benches, and then the sidewalks that connect either down through this landscape drive aisle, or aisle in the parking lot, or around this way to the Wegmans store, or across to the main street on the other side.
Could you elaborate how large that area is, that new space is?
Oh, the new amenity area, that's about 5,600 square feet of, new landscaped and pedestrian area.
Thank you.
This shows the end of the Wegmans store more closely. If you remember from the original plan, there was access to the lower level parking. The building was right up along Chessway, and so we were able to move it further away, reducing the impact on that street, and reconfigured the parking to get it more proximate to the Wegmans Center.
Based on that revised layout, Mr. Dirks, how have the changes impacted conditions for pedestrians?
The pedestrians has actually, I think, been improved with the addition of this intermediate crosswalk and the connection for the Greenway Trail. Otherwise, they're essentially all identical to the approved plan.
And does this layout impact access for emergency vehicles?
No, the access is the same. Emergency vehicles wrap around the Wegmans store, heavy-duty pavement, fire hydrants every 500 feet. So it provides the same access that was there before.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to call my next witness, Mr. Earl Llewellyn.
Good evening, Earl Llewellyn, traffic engineer with Kimley Horn and Associates. We prepared the original traffic study for this project back as part of the original QJ, which obviously included the larger Wegmans footprint. Since then, and as a result of that reduction, some of the other uses have changed slightly too as far as the trip generation of the resulting project. This site will be significantly less than what was analyzed in the traffic study for that project. Nevertheless, as was said earlier, they're still committed to doing all the roadway improvements which are indicated in the bubbles in green here, and I think they're listed in your staff report as well. I won't go through those unless you would like. But in summary, because they are committed to doing the same improvements and the trip generation traffic impact is less, it's my professional opinion that committed improvements mitigate the traffic impacts expected from the project.
Mr. Llewellyn, you stated that you were the traffic engineer that performed this original transportation impact analysis. Is that right?
That's correct.
Could you give the council a brief description of your background in licensing?
Sure. I've been working in the transportation field since 1988 and have been a registered professional engineer since 1993.
At this time, I'd like to tender Mr. Llewellyn as an expert in traffic congestion and mitigation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Llewellyn. And at this time, I'd like the TIA to be admitted into evidence to the extent it hasn't already been in evidence with the town's records. And we can leave that with Ms. Johnson. I'd like to call my next witness, Mr. Rich Kirkland. Mr. Kirkland, could you state your name and address, please?
Rich Kirkland, 9408 Northfield Court, Raleigh.
Could you give the council a brief description of your background and certifications, please?
Sure. I'm a commercial real estate appraiser. I'm certified in the state of North Carolina and a couple other states. I've been appraising in the Triangle area for the last 23 years. I'm an MAI through the Appraisal Institute and grew up in Cary, so I'm very familiar with the area.
At this time, I'd like to tender Mr. Kirkland as an expert in the field of appraisal and impacts to real property.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Could you please give the council a brief description of your analysis of the property?
Sure. I looked at the site plan, the development, and looked at the surrounding area, inspected the site, and was really focusing on the question of harmony and how well it fits in with the adjoining uses. Just to start with a conclusion, it's my professional opinion this is going to be in harmony with the area and it's not going to have any negative impact on adjoining property values. Again, I know that this was before the board before and that similar conclusions were found for a larger facility at this location. But looking at the specifics on this one, I'll note that it still is going to architecturally have to be consistent with a Twin Lakes planned development, so visually it's going to have that consistency. Again, compared to the original plan, the building footprint is smaller and lower to the ground, and those all really go towards speaking towards less of an impact on adjoining property values. I looked at a number of other similar developments, just since this pattern of developments are so common, having the commercial blending over into the residential, I just looked at projects up and down Davis Drive. I believe there's a copy of my report in the record, or there is. So you can, just starting on page 4 of that impact analysis, I looked at McCrimmon Corners Shopping Center and showing proximity of residential and townhomes to those shopping centers and how those set up. Homes in that situation are much closer than in this project. I looked at the Shops at Mooresville Market Shopping Center, right there at Mooresville Carpenter Road intersection. Again, I've got townhomes and single-family homes in close proximity, in fact, closer proximity in this project. Cornerstone Village Shopping Center, I've got, again, single-family housing much closer to this project, to that project, excuse me, than in the Twin Lakes project. So again, just looking at those that I looked up and down Davis Drive in the Cary jurisdiction, I was looking and found that it's a very consistent and pattern of development, and that there's really been no sign of any impact on those property values. It's a very harmonious location, and the other point for this is essentially that there is a large amenity, green space between the homes and the shopping center at this location, which even if there was something to think about, there's a huge buffer between this and the adjoining residential uses. So that is the basis for my conclusion. There's no impact on adjoining property value, and that this is a harmonious location for this project.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkland. Did you also examine aspects of the plan that address potential adverse impacts?
I did. I looked specifically at the aesthetics, the buffers, and the various green space inclusions.
And did you draw a conclusion about the way that this layout minimizes any of those impacts?
I did. Again, the aesthetics is back to, again, the building's lower. There's going to be more screening to specifically towards Chessway and Davis Drive. The buffers allow for a 100-foot buffer around Hatches Pond, but also a 15-foot streetscape along Chessway and along Hatches Pond Lane. And again, there's more green space included in this plan than the original.
And in your professional opinion, will this modified plan adequately protect other property from potential adverse impacts?
It is my opinion that it will.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkland.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further witnesses at this time, and be happy to answer questions or provide a summary of our evidence to date. I believe the testimony we've offered is competent, material, and substantial that meets all of the 6 factors. We heard from Mr. Leedy about why this change is necessary in order for Wegmans to continue, and how those impacts really reflect the changing use of the grocery building in and of itself. Those are all consistent with some of the shape and shop and work policies that were cited in the justification statement, and providing convenient, service-oriented retail to the people within the Twin Lakes community that are able to walk, they're able to have workforce abilities by bringing the 400 new jobs that are in close walking distance and proximity to the Twin Lakes neighborhood, and also the shop chapters. This is already designated as an area that will support that shopping use. As to factors 2 and 3, Mr. Kirkland testified that in his opinion, these reductions and changes to the plan minimize any potential adverse impacts, and that the plan will still be in harmony with nearby properties, the changes to the plan notwithstanding. Factors 4 and 5 and 6 were addressed by Mr. Dirks and Mr. Llewellyn, and that the changes to the plan still provide safe pedestrian connectivity, safe ingress and egress for emergency vehicles, and Mr. Llewellyn testified as to the changes in the traffic impact analysis. This is a reduction in square footage, but we're still committing to all of those traffic improvements that we committed to in the initial approval. And so for that reason, I'd request that the council make a favorable finding on all 6 factors and grant the modification.
Thank you. I have a question about the traffic impact analysis that was submitted today. that is different from the one that's in the staff report, or is it the same?
It's my understanding there was not on the link of the agenda, there wasn't a TIA that was linked. I'd be happy for staff to correct us, but I instructed Mr. Llewellyn to bring that original 2016 TIA that was submitted with the sketch plan.
So based on that, I need to ask council members if they feel they need time to review the traffic impact analysis or have a delay at all. Just my duty, but it's my understanding that things are better, not worse. And so based on that, I don't personally have any need. Any
I
other
mean, the
council-
reality is the square footage of the building is reduced, but yet they're still making the same traffic improvements as previously approved. So in my opinion, it's a better situation than it was.
Yep. Okay, we'll move along in the quasi judicial hearing, and now is the time I'll invite speakers who have been sworn in who wish to speak in support of this project application to approach the podium. Anyone to speak in favor? Seeing none, I'll move on to anyone who opposed to the request that's been sworn in that would like to speak. Seeing no one, let's see. We'll call on staff to provide professional observations about the request.
The inclusion of a large-scale building in the development is permitted by the Planned Development District, but is not in keeping with some of the goals of the PDD in terms of walkability and human scale. So if they're reducing the size of that, that's obviously beneficial towards those goals. The removal of the structured parking and placing parking next to the building is counter to some of the goals of the PDD in terms of screening parking. However, this is probably offset to some extent by the landscaped plaza area that they added in the southeast corner from where the parking spaces came from. Staff has suggested a condition of approval should council wish to approve this request that would clarify potential changes to the development, at how much change could be approved by staff and how much, at what point would it require council approval or review. And will also clarify that any reduction in the size of the building shown on the plan today, should the applicant seek to do that, would also have to be accompanied by a change in the parking amount. We'd also note that if council were to deny this plan today, that the previously approved plan would remain valid and would authorize construction of all the buildings you saw in that approved plan. Would also like to note the applicant talked of inclusion of a regional office in the large retail building. That is not a condition of the plan, and it is not enforceable unless someone would make that a condition otherwise. There are no modifications requested, so council is simply reviewing a development plan against the 6 approval criteria. However, of course, the focus really should be on how the proposed revisions are affecting that plan. With that, my staff would be happy to answer any questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Loveland. Now's the time for council members to let me know if, in addition to the question I asked you earlier, if there's anything else that's been presented tonight that would warrant a continuance of this hearing. Now's the time to speak. All right, so we're going to move on to the deliberative phase of the hearing, and I'll open it up to council members for questions or comments.
Question, staff or the applicant. The parking reduction is basically down to 144 less spaces than what was previously approved, so a total now is 778. How does that compare to a typical 103,000 foot grocery store? Is it low? Is it high?
It is in excess of the parking requirements of the PDD. How does it, I think I'd have to turn to the applicant about how does that reflect a market reality for
It's
grocery.
above what's required for what's proposed.
Correct.
Okay. And the office building, the 1,500 square feet, is not a condition?
They mentioned a regional office within the large retail building itself. That is not a condition, so that's not a binding offer at this point.
Okay. It's kind of interesting that they would mention that and that they were going to do it, but not make that a condition. But I can't say 1,500 square feet of an office is much of an office anyway. I don't have a problem with what's proposed. I still think it's a good use and a good development, but I would argue that this is better than what was previously approved. I was disappointed to see the underground parking removed and not surface parking removed. I think that this had an opportunity to do something different and remarkable in the town, set a precedent and set a high bar for what we're looking for in future grocery development. And I just feel like this is just not quite as good as what was approved before. That said, I think it's still a great project. I think we're all excited about Wegmans coming to town. I just like the other plan better, but I don't know that's going to make me vote against it.
Yeah, I'm, not to repeat anything you said, I like the idea that they took the opportunity to do a little bit more around the Greenway, right? Because you come off to the Greenway. I do like the expansion. I do think that people do like to sit outside and eat, having been a Wegmans customer in the past. Wegmans, this store is 3 times the size of the average Harris Teeter. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that we don't have, you asked the question, how does this compare to other 100,000, 130,000 square foot grocery stores? We don't have any. So it doesn't. But if you went to Wegmans and Tyson's Corner or any of the others, then you'd know what it feels like. But I did think it would have been a really great opportunity. I know it's more expensive. I mean, we all know structured parking is more expensive. But it would have been great to have been able to take the extra parking that they didn't need, now that it reduced, and still kept the structured parking, and then use the green space for something more interesting and reduce the impervious surface. That would have been a win-win-win-win. Rather, here what we've got is just a smaller building. But I don't disagree that it's still greater and better than the average grocery store applicant we get.
Other comments?
I'd like to comment that I do like the reduction in height, a couple of feet that's enabled. And I didn't realize until I went to the new public site on Green Level West that requiring connectivity to the neighborhood made them raise the building 10 feet because these entrances and exits all have to meet ADA requirements and stuff. So knowing that they moved an exit back and reduced the size of the building, let the building come down 2 feet, it's a positive thing for me because I think that height, the mammoth height of a building is just, it kind of jumps out at you when you realize that it, rather than towering over stuff around, I like the lower building. I think that's the biggest positive to me is the lower building height.
Any other comments? If not, we're probably in position to make a motion, and I would entertain one.
So for the reasons discussed, I move that we approve the proposed development plan with the conditions as stated below, as it meets all the approval criteria set forth in section 3.9.2I of the LDO. This approval is conditioned upon the following: that the applicant must satisfactorily address all remaining development review committee comments on the master plan set submitted for signature, and 2, an increase or decrease of the proposed floor area of up to 5% may be approved administratively by the Planning and Development Service Director. Any change greater than 5% shall require council approval. And any decrease in the floor area of the building shown on the development plan shall also require a commensurate decrease in the number of parking spaces provided, such that the approved parking ratio is maintained.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Gadd, I'll ask that this time is if everything's in order.
Everything's in order.
All right. Seeing that, I'll close the public hearing, and we need a motion to go into closed session.
Pursuant to GS 143, 318, 11A, 1, 3, 4, and 5, I move that we hold a closed session to consult with attorneys employed by the town and/or retained by the town in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the town. Among other things, the council expects to receive advice concerning the following lawsuits: Town of Cary versus the Time Warner Cable, Inc. et al., to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the town, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by town in negotiations. to instruct the town staff concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the town in negotiating the price and material terms of a contract or proposed contract for acquisition of property owned by Joseph Harris located at 7117 Carpenter Fire Station Road, Cary, North Carolina, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is made privileged or confidential by GS 132, 1.2, and/or 143, 31810E.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and we are in closed session. We'll reconvene our council meeting at this time. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.